Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
The ground's so soft and I felt so hard. I don't know you from Adam on this warm summer's eve, but I would be for all I would like to believe.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Sky in the Yard. It's written and performed by Kimmerjae Macarus for her latest Kimmerjae album, Air Kisses. It's the opening track of that album, which you can find on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Bandcamp. You can also find her debut album, Secret, wherever you get your music. Kimmerjae is not only a musical artist, but also a sculptor. And in this episode, we'll be talking about one of her latest works. To learn more about her physical artwork, be sure to head to bluestemstudioarts.com.
Love is in you. Slip into the lake and the splash is thin. This prince swims naked and it calls me in. Bright water wrinkles bouncing off your chin.
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the previous segment of the Mountaineer Podcast where we introduced a brand new format and our newest team member, Tyler Hickman. We hope to bring more segments like that to you on a regular basis, and we will absolutely bring another one very soon. Before we get into today's interview, if you haven't subscribed to the Mountaineer and you want to support local news from peak to peak, be sure to head to the mtnear.com and click on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our home page. From there, you'll get full access to our digital archives and scanned copies of our physical newspaper, and you can choose to send a subscription to your mailbox or to the mailbox of someone that you love. If you're interested in being involved in the newspaper or the podcast in any way, either to propose stories or ideas, or get advertising featured in the paper and or podcast, then be sure to reach out to info@themountaineer.com to contact our editor-in-chief, Barbara Hart, front desk at themountaineer.com, or myself at media@themountaineer.com to learn more about the options that are available. You can also head to the mtnear.com/advertise to learn more about each advertising package. If you want to speak to a staff member directly, be sure to call our main office at 303-810-5409. And finally, our top story today, brought to you by Brittany Wagner.
Our top story today comes from Mindy Leary, History, Heritage, and Harmony at Lincoln Hills. On Saturday, October 4th, 2025, visitors to Lincoln Hills were treated to a rare experience that combined history, nature, food, and art into one unforgettable afternoon. The guided tour of Winks Lodge offered a look into one of Colorado's most important landmarks of Black heritage, followed by a community lunch and a whimsical performance by the Central City Opera. Program manager Maddie Shaheen began the day by welcoming the group and introducing the site's dual mission of education and preservation. Our goal here is to educate, and we get to use this amazing space, which is a historic landmark as well as our living learning lab, she said. For the full story, you can find it in this week's Mountaineer or at themountaineer.com.
Thank you, Brittany, for bringing us our top story. And now, for today's primary interview. Our guest this time around, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
I am Kimmerjae Macarus, sculptor and musician in Lafayette, Colorado.
Now, I recorded this interview exactly 2 months ago on September 1st to talk about a new sculpture that Kimmerjae had put up in Lyons. And this sculpture went up in mid-August, right?
That's right. Her name is Shey. She's 4.75 tons of Lyons red sandstone on the peachier side of those colors. And she's climbable, and you should go visit her and say hello.
So where can you find Shey now?
In Bohn Park. I think that's how you pronounce it, Bohn. It's the park with the ball fields and near the St. Vrain north and south confluence there.
So how long have you been working on this particular sculpture, from the conception of the idea to sculpting the actual stone?
I saw this stone entirely before the 2013 flood. I saw it at a stoneyard that I worked, I did landscape design build for a long time, and I would occasionally go, even after I closed that and was doing mostly sculpture, I would still go visit the stoneyard on occasion because I just have this affinity for stones, and I just like to be there. So I saw this enormous rock, and before I was carving it, it weighed 8 tons. It was huge, and she's still very large. But anyway, I fell in love with this rock, and I would climb on it every time I would go to the stoneyard. And I looked at that rock for years, literally years. And it had some vertical fissures in it, which are called dry cracks in sedimentary rock. A crack that goes vertically through the bedding layers is called a dry. And so it had some significant cracks like that made me think I would be absolutely insane to even try to bring this stone to carve, and I had no idea how I would afford it either. Well, 2 things happened. I sold a piece to the city of Lafayette, which was significant, and so I had some money, and there would be a crane. And the other thing that happened was the 2013 flood happened. It moved everything around the stoneyard, and I couldn't find this big rock. And when I went there and couldn't find her, I was literally I felt immense grief and almost panic. And I ran around and I found her, and I immediately got the message, okay, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know what she's going to be. I just know I have to try. So I ran up to the office and talked to the boss, and I said, Eric, how much for that rock? And he said, for you, this much, but you got to move it. So it came. Then that was, my math is going to be off, 6 years, I think. I finished it in October of last year. So it came in 2018, about 6 years that it was here. I had a commission in the middle that I made myself not work on her for that period of time. At some point, I understood the character that was coming out of her. I understood that. And it was always sort of felt like Sphinx was one of the inspirations. But stone carving to me is a dialogue. So, it was a discovery process as well as me saying, how about your cheek is here,
And what inspired the direction you took to create Shey?
Well, so there was one thing I just felt kind of Sphinx-like about because it's sandstone, but partly, but also that I just kind of felt like there was this gesture in there. But at a certain point, I knew sort of reclining leonine figure. I sort of felt that to begin with. But I had done a proposal, didn't get this project, but I had done some drawings for the zoo in Palo Alto that had put out a call for sculpture there. And it was sort of an amalgam of several of their animals in their collections that they are proud of. It's fair to call it collection. Feels weird. I don't know. Creatures, animals. They're people. They're animal people that they have there. Anyway, so it was this sort of hybrid creature that I had been drawing, and I was obsessively drawing it for a couple of years before the stone came to me. And at a certain point, I did one drawing. It would always be a little bit different when I drew it. And there was one day when I did a drawing, and I'm like, oh, that's who you are, isn't it? And I stopped drawing, and the carving became more clear. So there is a fluidity and a dynamic sense that she might stand up and walk beside you that is unlike the Egyptian Sphinx, who is I'm sitting here forever, basically. But this one, there's a lot of potential motion in the gesture that she has, even sitting. So that's where I began. But, so it doesn't look exactly like the drawing, but the drawing gave me a sense of the quality of energy that I felt she had. And then the carving process is even to the level of like the hammer blows. It's like different stones are different about this, but I understood how the stone would release when I struck it a certain way. And it was very, very particular. And so that part, learning that, that's sort of like, that's really spiritual practice for me, to put it simply. So that was part of it. And then I had a sense of where her side was. And some of these fissures I was talking about in a few places. And on her right side, if you go see the sculpture, you can see this internal plane opened up that was right where her rib would be. And I'm like, you're kidding me. This is so beautiful. And I left that. And so people are like, why are some parts of it looking rough and unfinished? It's because, well, one thing, most of my sculptures have some record of all the stages of the stone. There's one, like if there's been cranes or saw cuts or how they were cut out of the mountain or, if that's how they came out, then the record of those marks, I usually leave them so that you can feel the whole story of the stone. And it just has arisen as far as this dialogue situation where I approach the stones this way, where I'm trying to understand and listen to them as much as I'm telling them to do something for me. And they kind of all want different levels of that. Some of them are very bossy and some of them are more malleable and amenable to whatever I want to do. So the process of discovering who this particular being was, just very slowly, I would make a decision and find a way in and remove some material, and then that would tell me, oh, this comes this way. And on a couple of occasions, there were these internal fissures that made a surface that I wanted to keep. And that blends in with the larger areas that are left rough, as I found them, which there's a structure on her left side that was probably what called me to the stone in the first place. It's very rhythmic, almost it feels like a ripple, but it's successive planes that have opened up in this sort of rhythmic way.
And the idea of Shey being put in a public park especially is so people, and particularly kids, are able to climb into and on the sculpture. Where did that idea originate from?
Well, I will acknowledge here my ex-husband, who is a stonemason too, and we are not in contact with one another anymore, but we worked together, and that was sort of the best part of our relationship. I think we did a lot of building together. But he once suggested that it would be nice to sort of create a space that you could move into the stone, actually be inside stone. And I was enthralled with that idea. So I will acknowledge him here on that. And the piece that Lafayette bought that enabled me to bring this piece is called the Boat of the Universe. And it is, you can climb inside of it like that. It's like when you see pictures of, a swan carrying its babies on its back, it's kind of that way, but it's rounder and blockier than that. It's a stone. But that one came from Salida. It's granite. But kids are in it all the time. And that was so incredibly thrilling to me that I just wanted to keep doing that. So the climbable part was just something that I felt was in me. And maybe, in my little imaginary world here, the stone that became Shey that we're talking about, I feel like she called me from a long time before I even saw her, and that this was part of her intent. I feel like when kids are on her, and that happens a lot, I feel like she smiles more. There's a little window into my inner life. I can't prove any of this stuff, but it is the story that I tell myself in the way that I live my life, that all the things around us are alive, that are not really things. They're all just part of the presence that we are also.
I should have asked about this background at the beginning of this interview, but I'll ask now. How long have you been an artist and sculptor in general? What is your overall artistic background?
Well, I think I was born a sculptor, really. I've always just felt a little strange in my family and in the world, and I was happier by myself with a lump of clay. Or stone didn't come to me for a long, long time. I didn't even consider that I would be able to carve it. And when I began to realize that, I was like, oh my God, you're kidding me. But how I got there was circuitous. But I did study art in high school. My grandmother dug clay for me out of her backyard when I was very small, and I made little creatures out of that. They were illustration creatures from the story of the Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling. Those were my first that I remember, my first pieces, and they were around for a long time. I don't know what happened to them. But so I just was always making stuff. And when my mom wouldn't buy me clothes that I wanted when I was a young girl, like I was 13 when I started making clothes. I'm like, she said, you can sew. And I'm like, all right. So I made silly elaborate sort of sculptural, outlandish clothing. And just making things was where I found solace in the world. And then I went to Interlochen Arts Academy and begged them to let me study sculpture early. I went there as a freshman, and they didn't really. You were supposed to do sculpture last, but I thought I would die if I had to wait till I was a senior to do sculpture. So I had a good teacher there, and then I finally, circuitous route, ended up at the University of Illinois studying sculpture, and those teachers were bronze people, and they taught me bronze, but I also did some clay there. Now I realized I wasn't really, like, the way the gallery world was at that time was not something that I felt like I could manage. I tried, but they wanted you to become a commodity. You make 40 things that look like the same person made them, and you put your name on them, and you dress like you can talk to wealthy people and be important and make them more important. And the whole scene was just nauseating to me. It was always a kind of spiritual connected practice for me, and an exploration, a discovery. And if I had to make things that were a commodity to please a gallery that was going to take half of what I made, I just felt like I needed to do something else for money. And so I began to study and practice landscape design. I went to graduate school for that, and then left and started my company, which ran for 10 years, and then I did design work for another while. But in that process, some old stonemasons taught me how to use grinders and chisels and whatnot. And at a certain point, I just looked up and said, oh, I can carve a rock. Oh, my God. And so that began to live in the center of my life. So that's how that happened.
And as you continued sculpting Shey over the last 6 years, what have you most hoped about how the sculpture will connect to people?
Well, when I was just in the last throes of finishing the work, which is really intense, physically and emotionally, it's like, because she's left rough in some areas, I'm like, am I being lazy? Do you want more? Are we done? Are we done? No, yes. No, there was that. And it was physically really hard. It was getting cold, and I didn't want to work through the winter on it. And I just pushed my body hard with this one. And as we were getting done, I was like, okay, you called me. I came. Here we are. I felt from very early on that the best place for her to be was in Lyons. And some of that is the quality of the community there, and some of it is that the stone came from near there. I've been to quarries up there, and I don't know exactly where she came from. The color of the stone makes me feel like she may have come from Carter Lake area. But Lyons, it felt like home to her, partly maybe because Lyon. But there was just something I couldn't explain that was the ideal place. So I just said to her, okay, I don't know how to do this. We're not answering some call. We're only going to move you once because all these cracks in your interior are not something I want to test more than once more in your life. And so, there are a lot of communities now that'll do an on-loan program that'll let a piece stay there for a year. If they like it, they'll keep it. And that's how I've had four pieces placed that way in various towns in Colorado and one in Florida. But this one, I didn't want her to move again. I wanted her to find her home because of the structural concerns in the sculpture, in the stone. And so I didn't know how to do this. I'm like, you better figure this out because I don't know. I'm just going to show up and do the next thing. And because I'm friends with people in Lyons through my connection to Andy Clark, who started Moxie, and that community of people he built there is so beautiful, and his family and the work family they're just all beautiful people. So I was talking to them, and there were some connections that began to open up that way. Meantime, a friend of mine, also from Moxie in Louisville, where I go a lot, we're just sort of, I would say close acquaintances or just early friends. This fellow said, well, what if I buy this for my family? And I'm like, are you serious? And I said, well, I want a lot of money for this. It was a big project. And he's like, tell me. And I told him, and he didn't faint. And he began to think about it. And I said, but I love you and I love your family, but I feel like this should be somewhere where lots of kids can climb all over it all the time. And he got that. And we began to look at other places and have conversations with the Louisville people, where they get involved in sculpture work for that town. But the connections opened up in Lyons, and they were interested. And then he did a very long appraisal process, took some months, and it appraised at and above what I had asked. And so all that paperwork got done, and Lyons was excited, and they passed a provision to accept the work, a legacy piece for them. And then we had a moving day, and then after immense discussions, we strapped her up, and she lifted safely. And when she was an inch off the ground, I was like, "You're going to be okay." And she went, and before the crane even drove away in Lyons, there were kids all over her, and I was so happy.
It's amazing to hear that the community so instantly connected with the sculpture. Is there anything else that you hope people will take away from this sculpture and your art in general when they see it?
Just to be befriended by nature. I think most people have a special feeling about rocks, either particular ones or in general. Who doesn't have a favorite rock somewhere in their house or that they carry in their pocket? Or that's why gemstone shops are so successful. We love them. And I feel like they love us back. And so when you give a rock a face or a gesture or an energy or a weight, an invitation to rest on them or touch them, you deepen that sense that the world loves you. And so that's what I would hope, I guess, is that people feel befriended by the stone that is such a big part of our Rocky Mountains here. Just, there's more relationship there.
Is there anything else about Shey or your art in general that you want to talk about?
I just love the different ways people approach the work. It's all, for me, this is a big discovery miracle that I get to do this work and that people get to experience it and relate to it in the ways they do. Lafayette has a wonderful program they call See and Respond, where two-dimensional artists and writers respond to the sculpture that Lafayette puts up every year. And then they have a show at the library. And so the sculptors get to go see how other people see, and words especially, like it can be striking, like how different people's interactions are, interpretations are of the work that we make. And I think that's a rare gift that we get to see, that kind of variety of people like speaking deeply about how they respond to something in their environment. And so I just hope that people will create their own stories, feel their way into their own stories with this piece and anything that I've got up in the world that's significant and as much a part of the story of Shey as my story that she called me from a long time to do this work. So whatever the interpretations are, those are part of who she is, just as much as my carving her was.
In that case, I think those are the big questions that I have on my end.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about her.
And thank you, Kimmerjae, for jumping on board and talking to us about Shey. If you want to see this sculpture for yourself, you can head to Bohn Park, located at 199 2nd Avenue in Lyons, which is now Shey's permanent home. To learn more about Kimmerjae's work, be sure to head to our artist website at bluestemstudioarts.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to this episode of the Mountaineer Podcast. I'll be back very soon with another episode. In the meantime, if you want to share this episode or others around with whoever you see fit, you can share the link to this podcast from wherever you're listening now. You can get the Mountaineer Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Podchaser, and others. You can also head to the Mountaineer Media section of our homepage or our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com to see a full archive of all of our episodes. You can also find our YouTube and Facebook pages in the Mountaineer Media section of our homepage, and you can follow us on Instagram by going to @mtn.ear. If you have any ideas, suggestions, questions, or requests involving the newspaper and or the podcast, be sure to reach out. Remember to reach out to info@themountaineer.com, media@themountaineer.com, and or front desk at themountaineer.com. And finally, be sure to keep an eye out on our website for all the latest local news and submit events to our community calendar, where you can find events coming to your venue or your community. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day.
pebbles on the beach, far as the eye can see.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Souvenir. It was written and performed by Kimmerjae Macarus and serves as the closing track for her latest album, Air Kisses, which you can find on Bandcamp, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. You can also find her debut album, Secret, wherever you get your music. She is also a physical artist, and you can find one of her latest projects, a lion sculpture she calls Shey, at Bohn Park in Lyons. To learn more about her physical artwork, be sure to head to her website at bluestemstudioarts.com.
The sky and I've been talking. Cinders of the stars, sky knows where they begin. Sighs a wave on a wave are watching. Cinders of the stars till they are soft as skin. The diving birds are sowing seed to sky. Some little fish will fly on bird wings. Some cry.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.